Close your eyes, if you like. Take a slow breath and let the sound of silence fill the space around you. Imagine the stars above, stretching far beyond the eye, beyond maps and names. This is a galaxy full of war and fire, but also stillness, mystery, and shadows. And in those quiet places, forgotten names drift through time like echoes. In the vast worlds of Warhammer 40K, some Astartes shine like blazing suns. Names like Roboute, Sanguinius, and Abaddon. Their stories are told over and over, carved into stone, shouted across battlefields. But not all heroes are known. Some walked through the same storms and stood against the same horrors, yet their tales faded like dust on old parchment. Tonight, we will walk with them. 3 legendary space marines, warriors whose names are rarely spoken. Their stories were not meant to dazzle or amaze. Instead, they remind us of loyalty, quiet bravery, and the cost of silence. Let this story lull you into sleep, like a dream told in the dark. We begin not with greatness, but with quiet strength. Let us drift back to the time before the fall, and hear the voice of one who stayed loyal when all else crumbled. To understand these hidden stories, it helps to picture the Imperium not as a clear book, but as a towering wall of paper and smoke. So many voices speak across time, but only a few are heard. Think of the galaxy as a dark sea where only the biggest waves rise above the surface. But deep below, smaller currents stir just as strongly. These are the legends we are about to explore. Their names are written in old battle logs, half-lost memories, and faded picts. They were never meant for parades or statues, yet they shaped events in quiet ways. Sometimes, those who matter most are not the ones shouting from the front, but those holding the line quietly at the back. In this story, we follow 3 space marines. None were primarchs. None led crusades or rewrote history with fire, but each one held something that made them legends in their own way. They were loyal when others fell. They fought with honor, even when forgotten. They stood in places where few would dare. This story also carries a rhythm, a soft one. You won't need to remember every name or planet. Just follow the feeling. Each chapter will guide you, like the gentle turn of a page in a book read slowly before bed. As you listen, you might forget where one name ends and another begins. That's okay. The story still flows. So let your mind wander, let your body rest, and know that in this tale, the quiet voices are the ones we'll hear best. Their steps echo not with thunder, but with the hush of meaning carried through time. Now, our story begins with a man named Garviel Loken. There was once a legion known as the Lunar Wolves. They were proud, fierce, and followed a primarch named Horus. In the early days of the Great Crusade, they were among the best. Their armor gleamed under alien suns. Their banners flew over broken strongholds. Among them was a captain named Garviel Loken. Loken was not the loudest or the most feared. He did not seek power or command. Yet those who knew him spoke of his sense of duty, his fairness, and the way he stood still while others shifted like shadows. He was the captain of the 10th Company. His brothers followed him not because he demanded it, but because he earned it. At first, Loken believed in everything. He trusted Horus. He believed the Great Crusade would bring peace. He believed the truth was something you could see clearly, like the stars outside a ship's window. But as the years passed, the stars began to blur. Strange words started to pass between warriors. Secrets were kept in dark corners. Horus changed, and Loken noticed. There came a moment when Loken was asked to stop asking questions. It seemed small at first. A battle report that didn't match. A meeting held behind closed doors. A change in tone when his brothers spoke. But Garviel could not look away. He asked again. He searched. And the more he looked, the less he liked what he found. He was there on Davin, when Horus fell. He saw the strange cults rising among the men. He fought creatures that should not have been. And when Horus returned, something inside him had changed. Not just his words or orders, but something deeper. Loken felt it, like cold breath on the back of his neck. And when he raised his doubts, others turned from him. But Loken did not run. When the sons of Horus turned against the Emperor, he stayed. On the killing grounds of Istvan III, when brother turned against brother, Loken stood. He was cast down by those he had once trusted, left for dead in the ash of betrayal. But death did not take him. He survived. Pulled from the ruins, scarred and changed, he joined the Knights Errant. These were Astartes who had turned away from their legions. They gathered in secret, bound not by banners, but by purpose. Loken did not lead them. He did not seek command. He followed, as he always had, the path he believed was right. And in that quiet path, he became something more. Not many speak of Garviel Loken. His name is not carved into the high walls of the imperial palace. His face does not appear in tapestries or sermons. But for those who know, he is a symbol. A warrior who did not follow the crowd. A space marine who chose truth, even when it hurt. Even when it broke him. There is something soft and strong in that. In the face of betrayal, he did not let bitterness eat him. In the ruins of trust, he still stood. He carried his pain like a blade, not to strike, but to hold against the dark. As you drift deeper into the quiet of the story, you might see him, walking alone among cold stars, watching, thinking, and always holding on to that one clear thread, the belief that loyalty means more than words. It means standing firm, even when everything around you falls away. Garviel Loken was never meant to be a hero in the stories, but perhaps that is why his story matters. His voice was never the loudest, but it still echoes. Through dust, through silence, through the long halls of memory, even now. The name Ultramarines often brings to mind perfection. Rows of blue-armored warriors standing firm, leaders who follow strict codes. Their worlds are clean, their cities strong, and their ways carefully written. In a galaxy full of chaos and madness, the Ultramarines stand like a wall. But even in such order, some stories go untold. Some names are left behind the curtain. Ardius is one of those names. He was not a famous chapter master. He did not lead great crusades or fight in the halls of terror. But Captain Ardius was the kind of leader whose value grew in silence. He worked through the weight of plans and choices, never once stepping forward to claim the light. When the galaxy started to break, it was men like him who kept the pieces from falling apart. After the horrors of the Tyranid invasions, Ultramar itself was scarred. Whole worlds had been eaten clean. Other planets still shook in fear, and supplies were thin. At that moment, there was no glory to chase. There were only broken systems, frightened people, and enemies waiting to strike again. Ardius was sent to these war-torn places. He did not come with songs or banners. He came with maps, talks, and calm thinking. What made Ardias different was his focus on more than war. He understood that holding a world was more than winning battles. You had to rebuild. You had to speak with those who no longer trusted the Imperium. He worked with leaders, even those who had lost faith. He used patience where others might have used force. Some thought it made him soft, but over time they saw how his methods held together entire sectors. He did not fight only with bolters and blades. His mind was a weapon just as sharp. In council chambers, he saw patterns others missed. He found paths through political traps. He saw when force would cause harm, and when kindness could win back whole populations. In the dark of the 41st millennium, that kind of thinking is rare. The Ultramarines respected him, though not always loudly. His peers spoke of him with quiet praise. Some saw him as a bridge between warrior and statesman. He reminded them that not all wars are won on the battlefield. Sometimes the war is in the space between two decisions. It's in the way you rebuild a city or choose to forgive a former enemy. There was a mission where Ardias was asked to meet with governors on a distant world. The population had almost fallen into rebellion. Others wanted to strike hard, burn the cities and remind them of the Emperor's wrath. But Ardias chose to speak. He spent days in calm meetings. He listened, and when he left, the planet had agreed to return to order, not out of fear, but because they believed once more. It was not the kind of victory sung in ballads, but it saved lives and brought stability. Ardias was never loud. He did not push to be seen, but those who watched him closely learned from him. They saw how he used silence to hold power, how he waited before speaking, then chose his words like placing stones across a river. He made sure every word moved the story forward. There is a place in Macragge, the home of the Ultramarines, where statues rise high. Great leaders, champions, and heroes of legend stand tall in armor. Ardias is not among them. But in the war rooms and planning halls, his name still passes between lips. Young captains read his words. Commanders study the campaigns he held together. They do not shout his name. They speak it like a note held low, steady, and firm. In a galaxy full of noise, Ardias worked in the quiet. He understood that strength was not always about firepower. Sometimes, strength meant holding the line with patience, knowing when to wait, knowing when to rebuild. That kind of power lasts longer than a single war. As we leave his story, think of him not as a shadow but as a steady hand, someone who watched the pieces, not to control them, but to protect them. In the end, he kept the walls standing when others had given up.
And that is no small thing.
Now we turn away from calm halls and planning rooms. Our next story leads us into colder ground, a place where wild snow falls, and the line between man and beast grows thin. In that frozen place, another figure waits. He is part of a chapter known for its wild heart and fierce honor. But this warrior is different. Half myth, half memory. His name is Bran Redmore. Far from the polished halls of Ultramar, away from the cities ruled by order and logic, there is a world carved by storm and fire. That world is Fenris, the home of the space wolves. Its lands are sharp with rock and snow. The sky often glows with the light of stars and the fire of old myths. The people there tell stories around fires where truth and legend twist together. Among the warriors who came from this harsh place, one name passes like a chill wind: Bran Redmore. Bran was not like the other wolf lords who made their names loud across the stars. He did not crave the halls of the Fang, nor did he hunger for glory. He was known for appearing where the fighting was thickest, then vanishing without sound. Some said he turned into a shadow. Others whispered that he had become more beast than man. The truth, as always, sits quietly in the space between. Bran led a great company, one of the 12 packs within the chapter. His warriors followed him across the ghoul stars and into places where few others dared to go. These regions were full of dead worlds, strange lights, and enemies that had no name. The Imperium barely mapped these zones. Yet Bran moved through them with steady pace. Where he walked, the howls of war followed. What made Bran different was the weight he carried. Among the space wolves, there is an old fear, a fear of turning into something else, not just wild or angry, but lost to the curse of the wolfen. It is said that deep inside, something stirs. A part of the warrior becomes touched by the old beast, the savage thing that once hunted in the dark before the stars were known. Most keep it buried. Bran did not always win that fight. His men whispered that sometimes in battle he changed, not fully but enough. His eyes would burn brighter, his steps would become faster. The way he moved, the way he struck, it felt wrong and powerful at once. No one spoke it aloud, but they knew. Their lord walked close to the edge, and yet they followed. Because Bran, even in his moments of fury, never turned on them. He fought for them. He held the line when others broke. There was a moment, during a war on the ice-covered moon of Caer Lannis, where this became clear. The enemy had pushed deep into the last fortress. Bran and his warriors were cut off. The walls had fallen. Cold wind howled through the broken gates. Then Bran rose. He did not speak. He simply walked forward, his blade glowing with frostlight. The fight that followed was not written in full, but those who saw it said that Bran became something else that day. Not a man, not a monster, just a force. After the battle, there were no enemies left, and Bran vanished into the storm. He returned later, quiet as always, with a wound that never quite healed. His eyes held more silence than before. Some said that part of him had stayed behind in that storm, that whatever had stirred in him had not gone back to sleep. In the halls of the Fang, his name is still spoken, but not with cheers. It is whispered. There is respect in that whisper, but also caution. For while Bran never fell to chaos and never betrayed his chapter, he stood close to something none of them could name. That space between control and wildness, between honor and hunger. And yet, he remained a protector. He led his men well. He chose his battles with care. He never allowed the beast to speak for him. In time, his great company grew quieter too. They became like him, hunters, watchers. They struck without warning, then disappeared into the dark. Entire invasions were stopped not with grand attacks, but with sharp, sudden strikes that seemed to come from nowhere. These were not wars of banners. These were hunts, and Bran was the lead wolf. Some tales say he still walks, that he left the Fang without word, that he roams the stars, searching for something lost. His old armor marked with frost, his eyes still lit by that ancient fire. No one can say for sure, but every so often a dying world will speak of a warrior who came with the snow, who fought like a storm, who vanished before dawn. In a chapter shaped by fire and ice, Bran Redmore stands apart. Not because he claimed greatness, but because he did not. He carried a curse and kept it from breaking others. He led not with voice, but with motion. He reminded his brothers that even in a place ruled by strength, there is fear, and that to face that fear with silence is a form of courage. His story moves like mist, hard to hold, easy to miss, but it lingers. As we step away from his trail, we move toward a deeper silence, toward a place where memory fades and names are erased on purpose, where even among the Astartes, some legends are buried so deep, only shadows remember them. In every fortress of the Adeptus Astartes, there are places where stories live, long halls filled with statues, walls covered in banners, scrolls kept in glass, telling tales of victories from 1,000 worlds. These are the halls of heroes, names etched in stone, faces frozen in metal, songs sometimes still sung in deep voices by those who remember. But even in these grand spaces there are gaps. Some pedestals stand empty, some names are left out. There are spots where the light falls, but nothing is there to catch it. If you walk slowly enough, you may notice a pattern. Names spoken too often, others missing entirely. It is not always by accident. In the Imperium, silence is not always the absence of memory. Sometimes it is placed there on purpose. It is easy to think of the Astartes as unchanging, warriors cast in steel, every step recorded, every deed remembered. But the truth is softer. Many of them vanish, not from death, but from the page. Stories too strange, fates too close to shame. Sometimes the ones who matter most are the ones you never hear about. You can find hints if you look. A battle log with a blank space, a chapter record with a missing name, a victory won by no one at all. These are the signs of the forgotten, not because they failed, but because their truth did not fit the tale the Imperium chose to tell. Among these shadows are warriors like Loken, Ardius, and Redmore, men who stood firm when others looked away. They did not rise to power. They did not ask for songs. Their stories lived in quiet acts, a shield raised at the right moment, a choice made when no one else dared. They shaped history in ways the records will never show. In some cases, their names were lost with time. In others, they were taken out with care. The Imperium is built on control, not just of bodies and weapons, but of stories. What is remembered shapes what is believed, and what is believed keeps the great machine moving. But memory does not always follow rules. There are old servitors that still whisper names long erased, vox signals drifting through the void, repeating the same line forever. Astartes standing before blank walls, eyes fixed on something they cannot name. These small echoes speak of something deeper, that even when a name is lost, the weight of its deeds remains. You can feel it in the way some halls fall quiet, in the stillness that comes over warriors when certain campaigns are mentioned. They do not explain. They do not need to. The silence itself carries the truth. There was someone. They mattered. They are gone. Some chapters hold secret rooms, not to worship, not to praise, but to remember without words. A room with a single blade on the wall, a set of broken armor, a name half carved and never finished. These places are not open to all, but they are real. They are the last light for the ones who did what had to be done and then stepped away. It is not sadness that fills these spaces. It is something else. A quiet strength. A calm that says not all heroes need a crown. Some carry the burden alone. Some make choices that no one else will. They stand in the dark so others can walk in the light. The Imperium, with all its noise and fire, depends on these silent few more than it will ever admit. And perhaps that is why their stories matter most. They remind us that in a galaxy where glory often hides cruelty and victory often leaves ruins, there are still those who fight for what is right. Not for reward, not for fame, but because they believe in something beyond themselves. As you rest here, think of the halls of heroes not as places of stone, but as living spaces shaped by memory. Every quiet step taken in the dark, every name whispered and then forgotten, adds to their shape. These shadows are not empty, they are full. You may never know all their names, but you can still feel their presence. Like the hush before battle, like the weight of old armor, like the voice that speaks only once, and then is gone. Let us now step from these shadows into another place, one colder still, one deeper, where the names are not only lost, but hidden, not by time, but by design, where even memory is not safe. In the next part of our journey, we begin to uncover those Astartes whose legends were buried for reasons darker than silence. The Imperium remembers its heroes in fire and gold. Names are carved into stone with reverence. Their banners hang in fortress halls. Their likenesses stand in statues taller than cities. But not every figure is built for the light. Some choose to walk just behind it, close enough to see, never close enough to be seen. In the days when the galaxy came apart, when time itself seemed to break and twist in the warp, one such figure moved through the wreckage. He was known only as Nemean. He wore the armor of the Dark Angels, yet few called him brother. He spoke little, often not at all. His eyes moved slowly through each room he entered, noting everything and everyone, but always without judgment. He carried the air of someone who did not belong, and yet belonged more deeply than any could guess. When the galaxy split open during the Horus Heresy, warp storms surged like a tidal wave across known space. Whole systems vanished. Fleets were lost. Millions of voices were silenced, or worse, distorted into things that screamed forever. Cut off from terror, 3 Primarchs found themselves in a corner of the galaxy that no longer touched the old empire. In that silence, they built something called Imperium Secundus. It was not meant as rebellion, not fully. Guilliman, Lion L. Johnson, and Sanguinius did not trust one another, but they trusted even less the silence from terror. So they made something new, something to last in case the Imperium had already died. It was during this time that Nemean stepped out of the dark. He did not announce himself. He simply arrived. Within the ranks of the Dark Angels, there was always a place for quiet servants of deeper tasks. Nemean fit this shape. He worked as an agent, an observer, a sword not drawn unless truly needed. His service record was sealed, his origin unspoken. He had the bearing of a Calibanite, one of the Lion's first sons, but none could confirm it. Some believed he had walked Caliban's deep forests before the Great Crusade, that he had seen the beasts, that he had spoken to the Watchers in the woods and walked away unchanged. During the rule of Imperium Secundus, Nemean was present at nearly every important moment, yet his name is not listed in most records. He stood behind the Lion during planning sessions. He stood beside Sanguinius during the funerals for lost civilians. He was seen speaking with Remus Ventanus of the Ultramarines, though no words were ever recorded. He served without title, without decoration, and without delay. What made Nemean different was not just his silence. It was his shape within the silence. Where others filled space with words and plans, he filled it with awareness. He noticed what others did not. When tension rose between Primarchs, he adjusted his position. When lies threatened to bloom in polite rooms, he stepped closer, not to expose, but to remind. His presence was like a subtle weight, not heavy, not threatening, but grounding. There are a handful of moments where his actions were recorded in truth. One such time took place on a moon wrapped in solar fire. A cursed cult had survived the warp storm and begun worshipping the burning sun as a living god. The word-bearers had seeded the corruption, but the humans had made it their own. The dark angels were sent to destroy the site. Nemean volunteered to go alone. He descended during the eclipse. He entered the stone temples, walked past fevered preachers, and did not strike until he found the altar. Then, without a word, he destroyed it. When the fire cleared, he stood alone, cloak torn, eyes burned red from light exposure. He spoke only once on his return. He said it had been necessary. Another record notes his interaction with a boy, no older than 12, found living alone in the ruins of a dead city. The boy had drawn chalk symbols on the floor, some of which matched forbidden runes. The other Astartes wanted to end the child's life. Nemean stopped them. He spent an hour with the boy. What they said remains unknown. When he returned, the boy was silent, calm, and carried a small token carved by Nemean himself. The boy survived. Years later, he became a key loyalist in a war zone where no reinforcements came. These actions did not seem grand. They were not victories measured in cities won or enemies slain, but they were shaped with care. Each act, each choice, pushed the weight of the galaxy a little further toward hope, or at least stability. Even the Primarchs came to trust him. The Lion especially seemed to rely on him in moments when logic did not bring peace. When Guilliman's certainty clashed with Sanguinius's sorrow, it was Nemean who moved through the space between them. He did not choose sides. He simply listened. And in listening, he gave them room to breathe. But Nemean was not without cost. The burden of knowing what others would not carry changes a man. In the quiet corners of his chamber, he would sit for hours without movement. He would look at maps of Caliban, though the planet no longer existed. He would hold a worn leather book without title, its pages never turned in front of others. Those who stood near him for too long reported dreams afterward, dreams of forests and old towers and a whisper that felt like regret. There were theories that Nemean was a former knight of Caliban, that he had once served Luther, that he had once been marked for death and spared by the Lion himself. The truth was never told, perhaps not even to Nemean. As Imperium Secundus drew to a close, as the storm began to shift, Nemean vanished. One moment he stood beside the Lion. The next, he was gone. No report, no farewell. Only a sealed message left on his bunk. The message was destroyed by order of the Grand Master. Its contents remain unknown. Some believe he went to hunt the fallen long before the Lion ordered it, that he walked into the warp with full knowledge of the cost, that he chose exile so the rest could return with clean hands. Others say he never left, that he watches still, in the places where history bends and breaks, that his armor has changed, but his purpose has not. The mystery of Nemean is not about who he was, but what he meant. He stood for something quiet and steady, in a time full of rage and panic. He moved not to claim power, but to protect something soft at the center of the storm. Perhaps memory, perhaps honor, perhaps only the idea that some truths are worth keeping, even if they cost everything. His story reminds us that the Imperium was not built by noise alone. Not every hero roared across the stars. Some walked carefully through the dark, never leaving footprints, but always holding the path open behind them. As we drift now from Nemean's shadowed path, we carry the feeling of quiet purpose with us. Not all warriors are meant to be remembered by name. Some are meant to become the silence between stories, the steady breath between words, and in that space they live on. There is something about sorrow that lingers longer than joy. It settles deeper, like dust in corners where no light reaches. The lamenters carried that sorrow not as weakness, but as a kind of strength. Their armor was gold, bright and beautiful, but across every chest plate, a red teardrop stood as their mark. It was not a sign of defeat. It was a promise, a message that they would feel every loss, and that they would keep fighting anyway. Alajos did not begin as a leader. He rose slowly, not by ambition, but because others around him fell. His squad was known for operating deep behind enemy lines. Not flashy, not loud. Their missions were quiet, surgical, and often forgotten. Yet in each one, Alajos was the last to leave. He made sure no one was left behind. His presence became something others leaned on, not because he shouted orders or made bold stands, but because he stayed calm when things broke apart. During the early stages of the Badab War, when lines of loyalty blurred and orders changed by the hour, Alajos's calm became vital. The lamenters had sided with the astral claws, believing they were defending their honor against an unjust command. But the truth twisted beneath them. The astral claws changed. Their leaders spoke of pride over duty, power over sacrifice, and Alajos felt the wrongness growing. He began to keep his own notes, quiet records of what his chapter was doing, where they were sent, who was giving the orders. Not to betray his brothers, but to understand why it all felt wrong. He still fought, still followed command. But in his heart, something waited, a hope that maybe they would see the edge before stepping off it. As the war drew closer to its end, the lamenters were offered surrender. Broken and bleeding, they accepted. The Imperium gave them a chance at redemption. It came at a cost. They would be sent into the far reaches of space on a 100-year-long crusade. No support, no welcome, no return, unless they earned it. For many, this was exile. For Alajos, it was the only choice left. He helped gather the wounded. He walked through damaged halls and patched broken armor. He spoke to the young, those too new to remember the reasons they had even fought. He told them to remember their sorrow, not hide it. That the pain they felt was not a curse, but a warning. A reminder never to forget who they were, or what they had almost become. When the fleet left known space, Alajos stood at the command deck of one of their ships. He looked out at the stars that grew stranger and colder with every passing day. The lamenters did not complain. They simply adapted. They fought tyrannids, warp-tainted pirates, and horrors without names. Planets that bled when touched, machines that screamed when powered. There was no glory, no praise, and sometimes no clear reason. But they fought because it was all they had. Alajos became known among distant worlds as the one who led the Golden Warriors with eyes like stone. People did not always remember his name, but they remembered the way he stood, unmoving, even in fire, always watching, always stepping forward when others faltered. There was a planet, unnamed in most maps, where a hive fleet struck without warning. The population was small, scattered across surface towers built from black glass. The call for help went unanswered by the wider Imperium. Only the Lamenters heard it. Only Alajos responded. His forces were few, supplies nearly gone, but they landed anyway. He led the defense of that world with nothing but instinct and will. It was not enough to win. They could not save the towers, but they held the evacuation lines open long enough for thousands to escape. At the end, he stood alone at the final gate, holding the line as ships lifted off behind him. He did not expect to survive. Somehow he did. A passing trader ship found him later, standing in silence, watching the burned sky. His armor blackened, his blade broken, his voice almost gone. But his heart still beat, and that was enough. He did not speak of that day. When asked, he would only nod and say the world had needed saving. That was all. Among the Lamenters who still roam, Alajos became more than a symbol. He became the shape of who they wanted to be. Warriors who carried sorrow with grace, who never stopped trying, even when the galaxy pushed them to the edge. They painted his symbol on drop pods, etched his name into ship hulls in tiny script. They did not pray to him. They remembered him. He lived longer than most believed possible. His hair turned silver. His hands slowed. But his eyes never lost their calm. He trained others, always in quiet ways, watching, correcting, letting them find their own path through the pain. His final mission took him deep into a region where time moved strangely. A warp storm had broken open a cluster of lost human settlements. Something old and hungry moved there. Alajos volunteered to lead the response. His commanders said he should rest. He refused. He left with a small force. Only half returned. His body was never found, but a week after the storm closed, a Vox beacon reached one of the outer watchtowers. It carried no voice, only a soft signal. A code known only to the Lamenters. A code that meant the mission had succeeded. On some level, they knew he was gone, but they also knew he had finished what he set out to do. In the years that followed, his name continued to move through the Lamenters like a quiet current. Warriors would leave small marks behind in ruins. A painted tear, a line from an old oath, a single word carved into stone where no one else would see it. Alajos, not because he was perfect, but because he never gave up. Even when the galaxy offered nothing but sorrow. Even when the rest of the Imperium forgot they existed. Even when the only reward was silence. He remained who he was. A blade that wept, but never broke. As we step from his memory and into the next story, we carry the weight of his calm. His voice now belongs to the wind between chapters, the breath that comes after pain, the steady beat of feet marching forward, even when the path is hard. There was a pattern to how Holgin moved through the galaxy, not by star charts or set routes, but by instinct, shaped over time into something more than skill. He could sense paths others missed. He would glance once at a broken wall and know which way the enemy had gone. It was not magic or gift. It was the result of years spent watching the same kinds of men fall into the same kind of ruin. Once you understood how someone breaks, you could trace the trail they would leave behind. The fallen had many faces. Some were twisted by regret. Others were cold and proud, too far gone to return. But Holgin always looked for something in their eyes, that one flicker that might mean the soul was still intact. He did not believe every traitor deserved death, but he believed every one of them should answer for what they did. And he believed it was his task to be the one who stood there when that answer came. Holgin's personal chamber aboard the Rock was small. He kept only what he needed. No decorations, no trophies, just a folded banner a small light, and a box of data slates locked with his own cipher. On one wall was a sealed cabinet. No one knew what it held. Some believed it contained a list of names. Not the names of the fallen he hunted, but the names of those he could not save. Names he carried, not as a burden, but as a promise. Sometimes a newly raised raven-wing rider would be sent to him for guidance. These warriors came expecting training drills or long lectures. Instead, Holgin would hand them a sealed scroll. On it would be a single name and a set of coordinates. The task was to observe. No contact, no weapons. Just watch. Some came back changed. Others never returned. But each of them understood the weight of silence after that. The Raven Wing was not just speed and fire. It was patience, control, the art of not acting until the moment demanded it. He once spent a year in silence while traveling aboard a deep space patrol ship. The crew grew uneasy. They had never seen an Astartes so quiet for so long. But over time they began to adjust. They spoke less. Their movements slowed. The ship seemed to follow Holgin's rhythm. When he finally spoke, it was to issue a single warning about a ship drifting near the edge of sensor range. His words were calm. The crew changed course. Days later, they learned the ship had vanished in a warp flare. Holgin never said another word during the journey. He was like that. Not just silent, but still in a way that made others reflect. Even other Astartes, hardened by war and centuries of battle, felt the difference in the air around him. He was not cold. He did not command respect by force. It was the kind of respect that came from knowing someone had given more of themselves than they could ever explain. When the fallen were found and captured, Holgin would often request to speak with them alone. These conversations were never recorded. He would sit across from them, helmet removed, his eyes steady. Some of the fallen refused to meet his gaze. Others broke down. A few tried to strike him, but he never raised his hand. He listened. Then he stood. And what happened next was never the same. Some were returned in chains. Some did not return at all. And some were simply gone, as if their presence had been erased, like a word scratched off a stone. The Grand Masters allowed this because they trusted him. Holgin understood the line they walked, the shame that rooted itself deep within the heart of their chapter. He carried it, but he did not let it poison him. He held it the way a craftsman holds a tool. He used it to shape better choices, better futures. He never let the past become an excuse, only a reason. There was one time, long after his last formal mission, when Holgin was seen by a lone scout near the edge of a warp breach. The scout's ship was damaged. The stars were shifting. Time and gravity were bending. And there, through the distortion, was a black armored rider on a bike, riding through a broken stretch of rock. He looked up once, then disappeared into the storm. That scout survived. He returned to his chapter with wild stories and confusion, but his mission had succeeded, even though by all logic it should have failed. He said it was the rider who guided him. A ghost, perhaps, or something else. He spoke the name Holgin without ever having read it. Back in the halls of the rock, some believe Holgin never left, that somewhere in the lower levels beyond the sealed doors, beyond even the halls of the inner circle, he still moves, watching, listening, waiting for the moment when he is needed again. He may never return as a name on a roster, but the Raven Wing knows. They feel his presence when they draw near to something old and dark, when they ride into a storm without fear, when the air seems to thicken just before a key decision. His memory moves not in sound, but in instinct, not in story, but in silence. What sets Holgin apart, even now, is not the number of missions he completed, not the traitors he found or the oaths he kept. It is the space he left behind, a shape carved out of stillness, a reminder that some warriors do not need praise. They do not rise through speech. They rise through steadiness, through carrying the unbearable without asking anyone else to feel it. And when he finally stepped away, if he truly did, he did so the same way he lived, with purpose, with quiet, without regret. Now, as this part of our story closes, we do not raise a banner. We do not mark a grave. We let the silence speak. We let the shadow move. We let the name drift into memory the way a candle burns out in the wind. Not lost, only resting. And when the raven wing ride again, as they always will, someone may feel a steady hand on their shoulder, not in body, not in voice, just a presence, a reminder.
That Holgan still watches.
And still remembers. In the deepest corners of the galaxy, time does not move as it does elsewhere. It drifts, soft and slow like dust through light. Here, things do not vanish all at once. They simply stop being seen. A ship floats just beyond the edge of signal range. A fortress becomes quiet. A warrior does not answer a call. Then, silence grows over them like snowfall, gentle, slow, and sure. The Imperium does not look back often. Its path is forward, always forward, crushing anything that does not keep pace. But in the cracks of that endless march, names slip through. They were once shouted across vox lines, etched into bolt guns, whispered between battle brothers before deployment. And then they fall away. At first, someone notices. A serf in the armory wonders why a rack holds one fewer blade. A tech priest finds a servitor attending to a room that no longer has an owner. A record is pulled for review, but the data is blank. The memory fades, not because of accident, but because something wants it to. Something that knows the power of forgotten truth. Some of these vanished warriors were sent on missions that should not have existed. Black orders from high lords whose names have also gone missing. They walked into warp storms that were never mapped. They stepped aboard ships that returned empty. Not destroyed, not wrecked, just empty. No signs of violence, no sign of them. Others lived and died beside allies who never knew their name. They fought without crest or color, their armor scraped clean, their oaths taken in private. They did not speak unless needed. They did not write. They acted, then faded. Some of them survived many wars this way. One warrior fought alongside 5 chapters in 5 decades, yet not a single hall claims him. The record only shows his presence in fragmented after reports. A tall figure, silent, skilled, unnamed. There are whispers in the librarium vaults of warriors who bore the wrong heraldry on purpose. They wore the symbols of fallen chapters, so they would never be questioned. So that if they were seen, they would be dismissed. Too old, too broken, from a chapter believed extinct. Their presence became a tool. They became myth before they died. Among these was a space marine once assigned to a death world where the plants could scream. His name was removed from all mission logs. Yet a child from that world painted his armor on a cave wall in red and black, still untouched by weather after decades. He saved that village. The people remember. The Imperium does not. There are old training grounds left behind by chapters that moved on or were wiped out. In one such place, a single set of fresh footprints can sometimes be found in the dust. No ships are tracked landing there. No rations are consumed. But every few years, one of the new scouts speaks of a warrior who corrects their stance during combat drills. A man who says nothing, just adjusts their aim and disappears again. No one sees him arrive. No one sees him leave. He is never on the rolls. There are reasons why the Imperium buries these stories, reasons beyond fear or shame. In a galaxy filled with monsters, faith must be simple. It cannot hold too many questions. If the people knew how many wars were saved by those who broke orders, who stood apart, who never returned to their chapters, it might cause the system to crack. And so these lives are not erased with hate. They are set aside with care, kept away like a shard of light that must not shine too far. But still, they are felt. The Tech Marines notice old armor pieces that do not match any current mark. A helmet with a shape not used in 5,000 years. Still polished. Still warm to the touch. Chaplains sometimes wake in their sleep speaking names they have never learned. Names that leave no trace in the records. Battle brothers sometimes pause mid-prayer and feel something near. A presence without form. Watching. Protecting. Ships drifting between stars have heard coded messages coming through broken Vox channels. The voice sounds like gravel and time. It speaks coordinates. The signal cuts off before any origin can be traced. But when those coordinates are reached, survivors are often found. Fleets thought lost are rescued. Colonists are brought back from the edge. And no one is there to claim the act. It is as though these vanished warriors are still serving. Not in life, perhaps, but in memory that refuses to settle. A memory that bends through space and holds its shape just long enough to save someone before vanishing again. Some say the Emperor knows them all, that in his great mind, locked in silence upon the golden throne, he remembers each one. That in his dreams, if they can still be called dreams, he walks among them. The quiet heroes, the nameless ones. They do not kneel, they do not speak. They simply nod, and he nods back. Others believe these warriors become something more after they vanish. Not spirits, but shadows of intent. That their last act was so strong, it left a shape in reality. One that guides a bolt round, that steadies a blade, that helps a lone scout find the right cave. These are not powers. They are not miracles. They are the last breath of a name that mattered, echoing one final time. In the Hall of Echoes beneath the rock, where the dark angels keep their oldest secrets, there is said to be a sealed corridor. No lights, no guards, only silence. Some say this is where these stories sleep, not in words, not in plaques, but in feeling, in air that tastes like memory, in walls that hold something heavier than stone. As we close this path now, remember that not every warrior needs to be seen. Not every name needs to be spoken to matter. The ones who vanish do not fade in failure. They fade in purpose. They gave all they had, then gave their place in the story too. And in doing so, they became something larger. Not legend, not ghost, just presence. Soft, quiet, lasting. So let your thoughts drift like theirs. Let the silence hold you. Let the memory settle not in the mind, but in the calm that comes before rest. In the dark between stars, where stories turn to echoes, some voices remain. And now you have heard them too. Even now, even here.